Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and today's video is going to be a fun one because we are building a figure from component parts. Now if you've watched my channel before, you'll know I had a great time building the kit from Barbarossa Customs, making this laser light Skeletor that you can see here. Well, friend of the channel Kriston has now sent me in a kit build to build my own Scareglow figure. These are all resin cast parts and they do glow in the dark, but as you can see he is in pieces. So today's project is going to be putting this figure together, giving him all the sort of paint details that the Scareglow figure should have. We need to make a cape as well, and generally just having a good time because I do really enjoy doing things like this. So let's get on with the build and see how we have to put Scareglow together. Okay, so here we have all the parts that Kriston has sent. As I say, these have been cast in resin. They look pretty nice quality as well. There's a few little bits that need tidying up on the edges, but overall they are really nice pieces. So it should be a fairly straightforward project to put him all together. With resin, it is a fairly sort of a tough material, so sometimes you do need to heat it up a bit to actually push parts together. But I see Kriston has very kindly included a whole load of notes here about how to deal with it, and also some information about how to put the figure together. But I think I should be fine, but it's always useful to have notes to refer to. I can see he's even included a couple of he-bands here and a spring to go inside so we can get the spring-loaded waist mechanism working. I've already cut out the bits to make a cape for this Scareglow Skeletor as well. I actually covered that in my previous video fixing up this one. The main part of this project though I think is going to be painting, because you can see that Scareglow has lots of details painted on his arms and on his chest, and I'm going to actually hand paint all of these. They originally would have had a mask that they would have stuck over and then sprayed sort of paint on. You can actually see that quite clearly because there's a little bit of bleed sort of around some of the shapes. But for me here, I don't have that mask and it doesn't seem any point in making it, so I'm going to hand paint all of these. We've got to paint the boots the same sort of shade of purple as his groin there, and then everything else is a sort of dark grey. I actually had a go at doing this because on this Scareglow that you see here in my video, I was missing one arm, so this is a replacement arm, and I painted all of this on, and I was really pretty happy with how it turned out. It's not perfect, but it's actually pretty close. So I'm going to do exactly the same method on this figure. So I think the first thing to do is actually just a little bit of tidy up and a bit of sanding just to take off some of the rough edges. Then once that's done, I'll get some paint out and we can start trying to copy the patterns on this Scareglow. I'll probably start with the simplest thing first, which is his legs. That looks a fairly straightforward pattern, and the boots, and then we'll move on to the more complicated things like his chest. Is his back painted? No, so we don't have to paint the back. That's one piece we don't have to paint. And then the head, yeah, that's fairly fine detail. So it's going to be a fair amount of work, but really good fun. So let's get on with the tidying up first. Okay, that all feels pretty good. Just a little bit of fine tuning there just to make sure the pieces line up. I think I could still take a little bit more off these arm posts. They're not quite lining up, so just a little bit more sanding on those. But overall, everything is now fitting together really nicely. I won't click the arms on at the moment because you need to heat resin up to stop it cracking, and I don't want to do that too many times. So I'm going to do that just on the sort of the last build when we've got everything painted and we put everything together. But you can see there that's not looking too bad at all. So the next stage is to actually start the painting process. So I'm going to get some paints out and try and work out what colours I need to make, and yeah, we'll start trying to copy the patterns on an original Scareglow, see if we can get them looking as close as we can to that on these. We'll start with the easiest part of the painting, which is going to be the boots, because they are just going to be a flat sort of violet purple. And I've had a look in my pot of paints and I found this model colour, the Vallejo model colour, which is called Violet, which is 70.960, and that's pretty close. I have just added a tiny bit of black just to darken it down, because the pelvis that Kriston has cast is a little bit darker than the original one, so I'm just going to try and match that rather than the original paint. I think it'd be nice to keep all of these sort of colours together, because I don't want to paint the pelvis. There's no point in painting that. So I've got a match that's pretty close. I'll put one coat on, we'll let it dry, and then we'll do a second coat, which I can sort of tweak if it needs it. But it's going to be the easiest job, because really we've just got to paint the boots. Now the boots have quite a lot of detail going around the back, but actually on the original boots that part isn't painted. It's painted very simply. They just sort of go round the back, ignoring the extra bit of detail on the top. And I'm going to do exactly the same, because I want this to look as close to an original Scareglow as I possibly can. So let's get to this first part painted. I've now put 2 coats of that purple on. As you can see, that's looking really pretty nice. And now comes the fun part, because I've got to recreate all of these sort of tattoo patterns onto this leg. So I've mixed up some grey, which is just a mixture of black and white. I've got a grey that's about the same colour, maybe a little bit lighter. And I'm just going to try and copy the patterns on the legs and see what happens. There are plenty of photos of Scareglow online if you don't have one to copy, but I'm lucky in this instance that I have one here that I can just sort of try and duplicate the pattern. I'm going to work fairly slowly, and I've got a very fine brush here, so I'm just going to sort of see what I can do. I've only done this once before on the arm, and it was pretty successful, so I'm hopeful that I can get something that looks right. But yeah, just go slow and steady, and I'll see what happens. I can't say this was the quickest job that I've ever done, but I'm pretty happy with the results. As you can see, they are not looking too bad at all. I've let them dry, and I've also given them a quick clear coat with some Mr. Hobby semi-gloss spray paint, just to protect everything that I've painted on. And it also gives it that sort of extra little sheen, because the paints I'm using are matte paints. All of these Vallejo model colours have a matte finish, so this semi-gloss just makes it look more like an original Masters of the Universe figure. So I'm going to leave those now. I'm very happy, as I say, with them. And let's move on to the arms. The arms are going to be the same process again, so I'm going to mix up a grey and just copy the figure that I have here. It's again fairly complicated, with a little bit of sort of more fine detail just on the back of his hand, but as I say, that's the one I previously painted, and I thought that actually looks pretty reasonable, so I've just got to do this twice. So let's get the arms painted. Those are both now painted, as you can see. I can't say I'm going at a sort of huge speed on these things. I'm just taking it very slowly. And in fact, that's why I've not been filming a lot of it, because it's very fine details. And I find with the camera in the way, it's quite hard to actually get a lot of those details put in. But the end results on these, again, are looking pretty good. I think I'm slightly better than the one that I did on this very sort of first Scareglow that I fixed up. So yeah, I'm very happy with those. Going to let those dry, and then we'll move on to doing exactly the same on the chest. Now, luckily on the chest, we don't have to paint the back. So it's just all of this detail on the front, and most of it is sort of larger details. There's a bit more sort of fiddly stuff at the bottom, but a lot of it is fairly simple. So I'm hoping that that one won't be too hard to do. But you know, so far actually none of it's been too hard to do. It just has taken a fair amount of time. I'm saying probably about 10 minutes per arm, and likewise about 10 minutes per leg. This chest, maybe because it's a big sort of bigger area, maybe sort of 20 minutes to half an hour. And again, once all of that is dry, I'm going to put a clear coat on top of it, because I don't want to sort of risk damaging this paint. At the moment it's fairly fragile because you've put paint onto a plastic surface, so it could easily be scratched off. The clear coat will stop that happening. So yeah, let's move on to the chest and get that all painted up as well. And there we have the chest done as well. I'm pretty happy with how this has turned out, because there's so many complicated shapes on it. I've done sort of as much as I can by brush, and then I'm using my pin tool, which is a pin in an old brush handle, to sort of scrape away any bits where I've made slight mistakes. And it's, yeah, as I say, looking really pretty good. I can see there's a few little errors up here, so I'm just going to take my pin and just carefully scrape those away. And then at the end, I am going to put another clear coat on top of it. So I think that is pretty much done. And the next piece is probably the most complicated piece, which is the face. And you can see that I've just started to do this. The face has some very fine details on it. So we've got the little sort of scratch on the top of his head there. We've got the details on his teeth, and then the areas around his eyes. And most of that I will be doing with my pin tool. So I'm going to put some black paint in here, then just get a little bit of it on the end of the pin and carefully sort of draw in and try and get it as neat as I can. I'll do the same for the eyes. And the eyes actually have 3 colours on it. So we've got the main part is black, and then you can see in the center there's also a red dot, and in the center of that there is a yellow dot. So it's quite a lot of sort of fine details going on. So this is going to take a little bit of time to do, and I'm just going to go very slowly and very carefully. But as you can see, I've got that scratch on the top of his head done, and that's not looking too bad at all. And once all of that's done, as I say, a clear coat on top of everything. Then I do have an idea to actually make this look even better, but I'll talk about that in a bit. These are all now painted, and I put the Mr. Hobby top coat on everything, and it's all looking very nice. I'm especially happy with how the face turned out. Doing the eyes is incredibly delicate work, so using a pin to add the details, they have really come out very nicely. But as I say, I'm not finished with this because I want to add one more coat of paint to Scareglow. If you look at an original figure, you can see that the plastic used has a sort of fleck to it. It's a sort of like a pearlescent fleck, and I think that's something to do with the sort of glow in the dark material that's used. So what I want to do to my Scareglow here is put a sort of pearlescent fleck over the top of it. So I have this Tamiya colour called Pearl Clear, which is TS65, and it just adds that little bit of sparkle to things. So I'm going to very lightly spray this over the figure. I'm going to mask off his feet because I don't want the feet to have the sort of pearlescent effect to it, but all the other parts, apart from his pelvis as well, I'm going to spray this pearl sort of clear top coat onto and see what happens. And I think it will make it look really rather nice and just give it that extra sort of little fleck and little sparkle even when it's not glowing in the dark. So let's go and do that, and then we'll start putting him together.
P-O-Y, P-O-L-L-O-I.
These have now had the pearl coat applied, and I have to say I'm a little bit disappointed. I was expecting more of a sort of fleck to it. There is a slight sort of pearlescent sheen to it, but it is really pretty subtle. I've done a couple of coats of the spray and it's not made a huge amount of difference. It's nice, but it's not quite as exciting as I was hoping for, but it will do. So I'm going to leave that as that. Now we can go ahead and start putting this figure back together, and to do that, first we'll start with the legs, and the legs are actually going to be easier than normally replacing legs on He-Man figures because everything is apart. I can actually attach the He-Man before we put it into the pelvis, and I think with these parts, because they're made out of resin, I will heat these up with some just boiled water just so it's easier to push these pieces in, and then we can get everything together. We also have the spring here which needs to be attached when we put this together, and in the pelvis that just hooks on the middle section like that. We can then thread the legs through and glue everything together. So let's get the kettle boiled and start inserting this He-Band, and then it should start to look like Scareglow. The new He-Band went in really very easily when I warmed the legs up just in a bit of just boiled water. So those are now on. We can now glue the pelvis together. So we have the spring, which is the sort of the waist mechanism that makes He-Man's upper body swing around and also Scareglow's. That needs to hook over this post on the rear section of the pelvis. I've then got to put the legs in and put a few drops of glue around. I'm just going to be using super glue, and I'll just put a few drops around the edge of this just to hold it together. It's going to be a little bit awkward because the legs do want to sort of spring apart. I'm hoping a few drops, and if I just hold it for a couple of minutes it will set, and then we can start putting together the upper body. So let's get some glue on this and push everything together. That's all gone together really very nicely, so we can now put the upper body together. So again, we just have to hook that spring over the middle post on the back of this figure. That slots in like that. I'm going to drop his head in, and then again I'm going to put a few drops of super glue around the edges. To get his arms on, I will also boil the kettle again just to warm these up, just so the resin is a little bit sort of supple so that I can push them over the post. I think if I tried to push these over the post now, this resin would just end up cracking. So let's get the torso glue together, and then we'll warm up these arms and push them on, and that will be the whole figure together for the first time. Well, that turned out to be a lot harder than I was expecting. I just couldn't get the arms on. Even heating them up in just boiled water, they just wouldn't pop on. So what I ended up doing is actually filing off some of the posts just to make them a little bit smaller, and then heating them up and pushing them on. So they are now on. They're fairly stiff, but they do stay in place. So that is the figure all put together. But as you can see, he's not quite finished yet. He's missing the cape. Now, in my previous Scareglow restoration video, I showed you how to make the cape, so I've already started work on that. I printed out the pattern that is available on toy-polloi.com. I have stuck it onto some of this nice purple looped fleece and cut it out. So now all I've got to do is sew this together and add a bit of elastic, and then we'll be able to look at Scareglow in his full glory. So let's get this cape made. And here is the finished Scareglow. I'm really pleased with how this has turned out. The painting on him is quite awkward to do just because there's so many fine details, but it's really worth making the time and effort to get that right, because once he's put together, once you've got the cape on him, that is a really nice looking Scareglow. And if we compare it to the original, it's pretty close in how it looks. I haven't got the painting exactly right, but it is close enough for me, and I think as a display piece this one works really, really well. Now let's try out the glow in the dark feature and see how well that works. As you can see, it doesn't glow amazingly brightly. If we compare it even to the original Scareglow really does have a very bright glow to it, but it does have a nice glowing effect with a bit of a blue tinge to it. I need to say a massive thank you to Kriston for very kindly sending this kit over. It's been so much fun putting it together. I love doing things like this. You take all the pieces, sort them out, do the painting, and at the end of it, you've got a nice figure that you can display. So hopefully this video has been of interest to you. If it has, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. And if you've really enjoyed it and want to help me out here at toy-polloi, then why not think about becoming a patron of the channel. You get early access to all of my restoration videos, plus access to an exclusive video series called On the Cutting Mat, where you'll see projects and restorations that you won't be seeing anywhere else. So have a think about that, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Toy Polloi. Subscribe for more great videos.